Welcome to Mindfully with Tumishe, the podcast that invites you to explore mental health with honesty, compassion, and openness. Each week, your host, Tumishe Oladapokuku, shares personal stories and stories from people like you. Together, we'll confront mental health myths and build a space where imperfection isn't feared but embraced. From self-esteem struggles to relational conflicts, we're here to discuss it all, with guidance from experts and real raw stories that inspire healing. It's time to live mindfully. It's time to be compassionate with ourselves and each other. Mindfully with Tumishe, new episodes every week, available wherever you listen to podcasts or at blackimages.com.
Hello, mindful partners, and how are you doing today? If you've been with Mindful with Tumishe long enough, you know that this soundtrack is what we started with 3 years ago. And I thought that to round off the month that we started on Mindful with Tumishe, it will be really, really great for us to revisit this music. I really love it, and it was created for us by Craft Magic. So how are you again, and how are you feeling about the fact that we are almost at the end of the third quarter of this year? I know some people, me included, who start planning the new year around their birthdays. I know people who start planning in September, somewhere in between those two groups. You have me. My birthday is just 10 days into the new year, so I must have some sort of schematical collateral framework ready from September of the previous year. Which one are you? Do you plan ahead? Do you wait until January? Or are you one of those people who simply looks at the calendar in December and says, so the year is ending? So, here's another question that I have been sitting with. Is it just me, or there seems to be a kind of dark energy subtly and softly shifting across the surface of the earth? Everyone seems angry, testier, everyone seems more cynical, more easily offended, and more easily triggered. And perhaps because I tend to see patterns in almost everything, I've been wondering if we're still trying to recover from the complex trauma of COVID. Yes, I said that. Perhaps the world went through something collectively and we never really came all the way out of that survival mode. We have learned to hoard food, toiletries, information, money, even emotional energy. And somewhere along the way, we've become emotional capitalists. We began to believe we were entitled to people because of the parts of their lives we could see on social media. Let me tell you something, and if we're being honest with ourselves, this is not entirely new. From village square meetings to town hall rumor mills and gossip magazines to newspapers and now social media, humans have always been fascinated by the lives of other humans. The internet didn't invent that curiosity. It simply made it bigger. And then COVID amplified it. And now here we are, trying to figure out how to live after surviving something we didn't fully understand while we were inside of it. I know you're probably wondering where this conversation is going and if sitting with my extended Old Testament family members has anything to do with it. The answer is yes. This is also the source of some of the noise I've been carrying. So if you don't understand where I'm going yet, welcome to my rambling mind. I apologize in advance. Or perhaps I don't, because that's actually what the series has been about. Sitting with the things that don't always make sense. So, let's arrive. Before we continue, let's arrive. And today we're arriving differently. Roll your shoulders slowly upwards and then roll them backwards as though you're physically releasing a version of yourself you've been carrying. Let's do that again. Slowly lift the shoulders upwards and backwards. Roll them and now drop them. Taking a deep breath and sigh it out. You can do that again. And let it go. Release. Maybe as you breathe out, you can ask yourself quietly, what version of me am I still carrying simply because I have carried her or him for so long? You don't have to answer it. Just notice what comes up. And remember, you can always send us a message. The link is in the show notes where you see send us a message. And when I ask, how are you? At the beginning of the show, you could always reply through that link. And then I can actually answer your question. Okay, I can hear you and we can work together. Hold each other's hands as we continue on this journey of healing daily. If you've followed Mindfully with Timshi for any length of time, you already know that I talk a lot about stories of origin, where we come from, what we were taught, what we witnessed, what happened to us, what we inherited, and what we eventually turned into identity. There's a Yoruba adage that captures this for me. If you do not know where you're going, you can always turn back to where you're coming from. I'm not very sure if there's a second part to that saying, but I understand why our elders thought it was necessary, because sometimes when you're stuck on a part of life's journey, looking backwards isn't regression really. Sometimes it is research. Sometimes you need to understand the road you've traveled before you can understand why you're standing where you are. And sometimes you need to conduct an ancestral audit. Not because your ancestors are responsible for everything that happens to you or is happening to you. Oh, please. I'm not even going to go there, but because family systems have a funny way of passing things down, stories, beliefs, ways of loving, ways of fighting, ways of hiding, ways of surviving. And unfortunately, sometimes ways of hurting one another. So today, I am sitting with the Israelites. Yes, again. Or maybe more specifically, the family before Israel became Israel the way that we know him. Yes, Jacob's family. Uncle Jake is back. Because before Joseph became the great administrator of Egypt, before the dreams, before the coat, before the pit, before the prison, before the palace, this definitely was a family. And what a family that was. Honestly, I didn't know if my nervous system would have been able to survive living in Jacob's house. 10 brothers, one younger brother treated differently, a sister that was raped, and then the brothers went to take revenge, and then the father, a father with favorites, a mother whose story was tangled up with longing, the sibling rivalry that started the family, competition, old wounds, new wounds, and of course, Uncle Jake himself carrying a history that was already complicated before he became a father. Rachel, the love of his life, wanting children desperately. And when she finally had Joseph, I could almost understand. And I'm sure you do, if you look at it, why the boy became precious to her and to Jacob. But imagine being one of the other brothers, and indeed, Dinah, watching your father love one child differently, being a different father completely to this one person, watching a family dynamic shift around this one person, watching Joseph receive something you didn't. As I said through the series, we sit down, we read the stories for 10, 20 minutes, and sometimes forget that these were people, real people with emotions, with intentions. Even if they were mythical, they are mythical people were mythical people with emotions, with intentions. People who probably woke up in the morning and went to sleep at night, not knowing that thousands of years later, Oluwatumshe will be sitting here with other people discussing the family dysfunction. So, before we judge the 10 brothers for everything they did, can we give them a little grace? I'm not asking for absolution. I'm asking for grace because context matters. And that is something this entire series has been teaching me. The person we are really sitting with today, however, is Joseph. Yes, Joseph and Tumishi. Or maybe I should say Tumishi Mokbele and the woman she eventually became or is becoming. You see, Tumishi Mokbele was almost a poster child. I've said that already. And honestly, that was both a blessing and a curse, because when I tell people some of the stories that shaped me, I see the look in their eyes and they sometimes struggle with aligning those stories with the Tumishi or the Tishe or the Tumi they have come to know. I was intelligent, or I am intelligent, capable, functional, responsible, and as I've told you before, I've also lived very well with approval addiction. I carried it so well that sometimes even I didn't recognize it. And this is where Joseph begins to make sense to me, because Joseph was privileged. He was loved by his father. He was favored. He had access to something his brothers didn't. But privilege didn't mean that his journey would be easy, and favor didn't mean that he wouldn't be transformed by what came next. Joseph's journey to Egypt began with the people he trusted the most. We already know that. But maybe that was part of his awakening. Everything he had learned sitting at his father's feet, everything he understood about himself, his family. Some people will say he was not emotionally intelligent, because if you told us dream once and your brothers didn't, you saw your brothers' responses, something should tell you to say it again. But he had his position. His place in the world was about to be tested outside the environment that had formed him. And that made me ask myself, what was Egypt for Tumushe? My first Egypt was Command Secondary School, Abakaliki. And that may surprise you, because I've spoken about Command Secondary School, Abakaliki, being one of my safest space growing up. Because when we hear Egypt in the Joseph story, we tend to think of captivity, prison, displacement, loss. But my first Egypt was safe. It was one of the first places where I had enough safety to begin introducing myself to myself. I was 11, and I remember thinking things like, maybe I don't have to keep introducing myself to myself with my survival story. Maybe I too am allowed to become. Trust me, that was huge. I did not have time to go through why it was huge, but someday you'll find out. Because when you have spent a long time understanding yourself through what happened to you, you can begin to mistake your survival story for your identity. And that was me. I became the girl who survived, the girl who protected her brothers, the girl who knew how to behave, the girl who was intelligent, the girl who was responsible, the girl who carried the family name. And then you arrive somewhere like me, and suddenly, there is enough silence to ask, who am I when I don't have to survive? Maybe that was my first Egypt, and maybe that was where I first began to understand something about privilege, because Joseph was privileged. So was I. And saying that does not erase the pain. Both things can be true. You can be given things and still have things taken from you. You can have privilege and still have wounds. You can be loved and still not know how to receive love. You can have access to education and still be emotionally confused. Life, everything about life, is rarely one thing. And maybe that's why I've become increasingly suspicious of neat answers, because human beings are almost never neat. Let me take you to my second Egypt, which was a heartbreak also in common secondary school at Bakaliki. I had been heartbroken by my first boyfriend. I was 13. Do not roll your eyes. And looking back now, I understand that heartbreak wasn't simply about the relationship. It was about what I didn't know. I really didn't know what loving and being loved looked like. I knew provision, I knew education, I knew responsibility. I knew what it meant for people to do what they believed they were supposed to do. But love, that was a different language for me. And I didn't speak it fluently. What I learned from that experience was something I still carry today. Proximity to something doesn't necessarily mean you have access to the thing. You can be close to love and not know love. You can be close to family and not feel safe. You can be close to opportunity and not know how to use it. And you can be close to God and still have questions. And perhaps that is the messy middle. There was another thing happening beneath all of this. My family name. Oh, my family name. Wait for it. Binu Waye. Loosely translated, that name means the one who came to the world angry. Listen. You were either going to carry that name with pride, or you carried it with pride. Your third option, you were going to hear about it and learn to love it, even if it didn't align with your personal beliefs. Let me tell you, I still catch myself to date under certain circumstances saying, me, Omo Baba Binuwaye, meaning me, the child of Binuwaye. Or more appropriately, me, a descendant of Baba Binuwaye. And the prayer that came with that name wore me for a long time. This family trait of vexation, interpreted as pride. You dare not show vulnerability, because very quickly someone would remind you, Omo Baba Binuwaye, you are your father's daughter. You are from a lineage of great men.
Sometimes clarity comes in silence. Other times it takes a gentle nudge, a conversation, a question, or a pause you didn't know you needed. That's what BHM coaching at Black Images offers. Not a fix, not a formula, but a space. One where your story is safe and your growth doesn't have to look like anyone else's. You can begin with a free discovery session. Just 30 minutes to breathe, reflect, and maybe, if you're up for it, sit with guided meditation. If life feels loud and you need support now, there's mindful coaching on the go. Short, focused check-ins that help you stay grounded when things feel shaky. For deeper shifts, there's the Journey to Being, a mindful exploration shaped by the framework from the book Living Mindfully, A Journey to Being. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence. And if you're someone who needs steady hands over time, The monthly and community plans are there, offering consistent support that grows with you. Visit blackimages.com when you're ready, not to be fixed, but to be seen.
Who wore anger as pride. So, what happens when a child grows up believing that vulnerability is dangerous? She learns to wear pride. She learns to look strong. She learns to swallow pain. She learns to maintain the family image. She learns to perform. And she may become very, very good at it. And maybe that is you too. My first Egypt stripped some of that away. Heartbreak stripped some more. And then professional Egypt came knocking. I had become compromising. Of course, a lot of you know that I was in radio for over 20 years. I had become uncompromising. I don't mean that entirely as a compliment in this case. I had a very strong sense of what was right, what was fair, what was professional, what people should and shouldn't do. And then one day, as I say this, I remember that drama. I called out my boss for relieving me late. An hour late. Something that happened within the department and people had been taking and grumbling about quietly for years. But nah, Omo Baba Binuai was not doing that. I went at the boss and I went hard. And of course, I got punished for it. But I didn't care. After all, Omo Baba Binuai, yeah? What were they going to do? They could punish me, but they couldn't take away my creativity. At least that was what I told myself. What actually happened? A friend of mine, Femi, may God rest your soul, eventually said to me once, "Babe, you need to learn how to play this game diplomatically." And honestly, I didn't understand what they were saying, because in my mind, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was doing my job. I came early. I relieved people early. I worked. I was responsible. Why should I have to play a game? But that is the interesting thing about life. Sometimes the thing you are absolutely right about doesn't mean the way you carry that right is the most useful way to carry it. That was a difficult lesson, especially for somebody like me, because I had inherited a work ethic from my father. See, my father was also a civil servant. He had strong principles at work. I had watched them. I had absorbed it. So when people heard my son lean back into day before I became Tumishe Kuku, they said something like, "Oh, we understand your work ethic. You're your father's daughter." I would laugh in my head because they didn't know. They didn't know the irony. Because at that point in my life, my father and I were just physically alive. I bared his name and that was just it. But philosophically, I was doing everything I could to make sure I wasn't him. And yet, I was carrying some of the very things I didn't like about him. I had learned from him. And my dear mindful partner, that is how inheritance works. Sometimes you reject the person and keep the pattern. This is where mindful living requires awareness, because you can transform what you do not recognize. For years, my professional Egypt was what we called in radio Siberia. So I was in professional Siberia for a long time. Every opportunity that was professionally mine seemed to go to someone who was professionally behind me. I kept showing up, I kept working, I kept refusing to compromise the quality of what I did. And one of those things is I refused to receive payola. Payola is some kind of, if you don't know what payola is some kind of incentive to help artists get airplay. I would not say I didn't receive at all. There was a time or two that I did, but I felt so tired because the songs weren't good. And after the second time, I said no. I kept refusing to compromise the quality of what I did, and it took 12 years. 12 years. Before that uncompromising work ethic eventually became part of the thing that announced Tumiche professionally. The same quality that had made me difficult to manage, so they said, eventually became leverage. And that is very Joseph. Because Joseph's journey did not require him to throw away everything his father taught him. He had to learn how to use it in another environment. It had to become something different without becoming unrecognizable to himself. Maybe that is where I finally began to understand him. Not as the person who was this, Potiphar, and you know the story, so there's no link going into it. Because here's the thing, you can be doing everything right, and everything else can still feel like Murphy's Law has taken up residence in your house. Give me permission to give a deep sigh here. Murphy's Law. Where everything that could go wrong goes wrong. You can be honest, you can work hard, you can pray, you can fast, you can prepare, you can love people, you can make good decisions, and things can still go wrong. That doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. Oh, I'm preaching to myself also today. And I'm not saying your story of origin is necessarily the root of everything that goes wrong in your life. Please, let's not turn this episode into another formula. That's exactly what I do not want. I'm saying, your story of origin may give you clues. It may show you the tools you developed. It may show you the armor you've learned to put on. It may show you the things you inherited, the patterns you'd rather not have, but inherited, and the things you decided to reject. And sometimes it may even show you why you keep using the tool long after the situation that required it has disappeared.
Life moves fast, sometimes too fast. If you're looking to slow down and reconnect with yourself, Living Mindfully, A Journey to Being by Oluwatomise Oladapo Kuku might be what you need. It's part memoir, part guide, an honest, deeply personal story about navigating life's noise with intention. Oluwatomise shares lessons from her own journey through struggle, reflection, and healing, with a voice that's equal parts vulnerable and wise.
It felt like she was speaking directly to me, raw, real, and quietly powerful.
Get your copy wherever books are sold or visit blackimages.com to begin your journey. Living Mindfully, A Journey to Being. Slow down, breathe, begin.
So I'll quickly get to Babylon again. 2 episodes ago, this is where I think Daniel came in. I sat with Daniel in Babylon. Can you remember that? 2 episodes ago. And I said something that may sound like I'm contradicting myself now. No, I'm not. Daniel understood his environment. He discerned it. He knew what belonged to him and what didn't. He didn't surrender his identity because Babylon was different. But he also understood that he was living in Babylon. He wasn't pretending he was still in Jerusalem. And perhaps that's the social tool we all need in our lifestyle kit. Discernment. Not everything you inherited needs to be discarded. Not everything you inherited needs to be preserved. Some things need to be honored. Some things need to be questioned. Some things need to be softened. Some things need to be strengthened. And some things, like family vexation, need to be left behind. And that, to me, is mindful living. Not becoming a blank slate, not searching endlessly for some perfect version of yourself, but becoming aware enough to ask, what am I carrying? Why am I carrying it? Is it still serving me? And if it isn't, what would it look like to put it down? Maybe that's what happened to Joseph, the boy who sat at his father's lap, who had to become a man in Egypt. He had to move through the beats, through betrayal, through slavery, through praising, through power, through responsibility, and eventually he stood in front of the very people who had hurt him, and he had a choice. He could allow his history to dictate his future, or he could understand his history well enough to choose differently. That is a part of Joseph's story that interests me now. Not that he became powerful, not that he interpreted dreams, not that he saved people from famine, but that he eventually had enough insight to look at the people who had been part of his pain and understand the story differently. And maybe that's where Tomise Mapele meets Tomise Kuku. Not at the point where everything has been healed. Not at the point where the past no longer matters. Nah. In the middle, where I can say, this is what I inherited. This is what happened to me. This is what I learned. This is what protected me. This is what hurt me. This is what I carried too long. And this is what I am choosing You might be asking, how does the story of Joseph and Tumishi connect to mindful living? Really? Maybe. Mindful living is not about becoming someone who never gets angry, or someone who never gets hurt, or someone who never carries the marks of where they come from. Maybe it's simply the willingness to notice before we react, to ask where this comes from, or where did this come from? Is this mine? Is this useful? Does this still belong to the version of my life? Because sometimes the thing that saved you in Egypt cannot be that thing that leads you into your promised land. And sometimes also, the thing you thought was your greatest weakness may simply be a strength that has not yet learned how to live in a different environment. Maybe we do not have to throw ourselves away to become who we are meant to be. And maybe we have to become conscious enough to separate the person from the pattern, the inheritance from the identity, the armor from the person underneath. And perhaps that is what this entire series has been asking me to do. And maybe you too. Not to find myself, because I have met too many versions of Tumishi to believe there's one fixed person waiting somewhere to be discovered. There's Tumishi Mokbali, there's Tumishi Ladakukuku, there's Tumishi Kuku. Yes, you heard that. There's the girl, the sister, the daughter, the broadcaster, the woman, the mother, the healer, the person still healing, and all of this are me. The work is not to kill one version so another can live. The work is to listen, to understand, to integrate, and to choose consciously. And as we close this particular conversation, I want to leave you with just one question. Not a neat answer. We've already agreed that there are no neat answers. There's questions. What did you inherit that once protected you, but may now be asking you to be transformed? As usual, you know not to rush it. Sit with it. Maybe write it down. Maybe talk to yourself about it. Maybe simply notice what comes up. And if the answer doesn't come today, that's very okay. You've got time. After all, we are all in one way or another walking each other home, and probably still walking through our own Egypts. Thank you for walking through my Egypt with me and sitting with Joseph, of course. Till the next conversation, please take care of yourself. And remember that mindful living is not about getting life right. No, that's a big myth. It's about becoming present enough to know what life is asking of you now. So, good luck. But before I go, let me say a big thank you to my absolutely amazing assistant, Toby Ogunṣe. Thank you for always. And if any of this episodes or all the episodes that you've listened to touched something in you, all right, or resonated with you, that's what I was looking for. Please like, please share, follow. That gives us a little bit more visibility, and I honestly will appreciate it. Do not forget that you can send me a message with a link under this that says send me a mail. All right, send a message. Let's have a conversation and hold each other's hands, of course. And if you have, again, followed Mindful with Timshe for the last 3 years, you know that in November we have a men-only mental health conference. So, if you've not heard about it before, the best way to hear about it is to follow us at Mindful with Timshe on Instagram. All details are there. Get ready. This year we're talking financial intelligence and emotional intelligence. So be there. Registration is already on and the seats are limited. So follow us on Instagram at Mindful with Timshe and you get details. Love yourself, love your neighbor, love this country above all of this, love God. He is the essence of your being. I am Oluwatomishe Oladapo Kuku. Stay mindful.
This is Mindfully with Tumishe, brought to you by Black Images.